When a person faces rejection because they're growing, and that seems like a positive thing, right? That they're growing, that they're becoming more, that they're achieving the result that they want. But achieving that result may cost them something that feels like primal safety. As an entrepreneur and an equestrian, I've been in and out of a lot of different coaching programs in my life, and I can honestly say that they've been completely integral to my success in a number of different areas. But because I've been in and out of coaching programs for well over a decade, I wanted to shed some light on the dark side of coaching, and today I'm going to share with you 5 things that I hear life coaches say that perpetuate trauma. I'm Sukie Baxter, founder of Whole Body Revolution, where I help you to rewire yourself for greater health, happiness, and success. If you're new here, make sure you click that subscribe button and hit the bell so you get notified every time I release a video and you don't miss out. All the links to everything that I mentioned in this video, you can find linked in the description box below. So let's jump right in. So what are 5 things that life coaches say that perpetuate trauma? So I know that coaches are wanting to move people forward and get them results. And coaching falls in one of those funny little gray areas where it's not really exactly therapy, but it's not really consulting and strategy either. But it can cross over because there's a lot of healing work that gets done in coaching paradigms, whether it's life coaching, business coaching, sports coaching. I consider my horse trainer to be a riding and horse coach. So there are a lot of areas where coaching comes up in our lives. And along with the coaching and along with the growth comes up a lot of internal blockages. And so healing work does get done, even though it's not necessarily the realm of, say, psychotherapy. Unfortunately, there are some pretty toxic practices in life and business coaching, and I've heard these things come up over and over again. I've been told them myself, and I've heard other people be told these things. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Number 1, the first thing that I hear life coaches say that is so traumatizing is you're not being coachable. Now I get it. If someone comes to you for advice and you want to help them get results, it's helpful if the person does what you tell them to do. But when you say you're not being coachable, what you're really saying is you're not being compliant. And that's a really big problem because especially for women, not just women, but particularly for young women, we become conditioned to be people pleasers, to do what we're told, to not make waves, to not stick our neck out, to not upset the balance of things. And when we do, we get punished for it a lot. And when you're telling somebody to be compliant, it perpetuates that trauma and it severs that connection that that person has to their own intuition and to their own sense of direction. Because yes, as a coach, you want that person to get results, but you can't necessarily do it by following a checklist or a blueprint or a proven pathway, because that pathway, checklist, blueprint only worked for that particular person. And this is why expert advice can be so dangerous. It can really only take you so far. And then at a certain point, you really need to trust yourself. You need to rely on yourself. So as a coach, if you're telling somebody you're not being coachable and you're not being compliant, you're giving that person a really difficult choice. You're putting them in a really tough situation because now that person has to make a decision between doing what you want them to do and being a good client or being a bad person and trusting their intuition. That's a really tough place for them to be, and it's certainly not what you want, I would imagine, as a coach. So if you are a coach and you find somebody that you are coaching is not being coachable, that you want to tell them that, maybe you could instead say, I feel like there's some resistance here and there might be something really important to work with. Now, you as the coach might not be the person who needs to work with that, but it's totally appropriate to acknowledge that there's something there that needs to be addressed and to get that person the support that they deserve, whether that's with you or with another qualified practitioner going down another route. Okay, the number 2 thing that I hear that life coaches say that perpetuates trauma is focus on the positive, aka toxic positivity. If you haven't heard of toxic positivity, Well, there is a culture inside of spiritual growth and personal growth, self-improvement, self-help, all of the self-growth development things that says that you have to focus on the positive because you are attracting or manifesting what you put your attention on. And so if you are feeling negative, if you're feeling down and depressed or scared or whatever other quote negative emotion, if you focus on that thing, then you will just attract more of it. I get it. There actually is a little bit of neuroscience behind that. There's with all things, there's a little bit of truth to that, right? That if you are constantly focusing on the bad stuff, then yeah, you tend to get tunnel vision and really only see the bad stuff. And so coming from a pain healing background, the way that this works is if you have a physical pain in your body and you focus on that pain, it actually sensitizes your nervous system, your brain, to the pain. It puts your body into a threat state. And the more you're in a threat state, the more the world actually looks threatening. And this is physiological. This isn't just some airy-fairy woo-woo thing. This is a physiological, neurological process that happens in your body. So the more you hone in on that pain and the more you make it a problem, the more you're going to experience the pain because it just kind of gets you into this negative spiral. I get it. But when you tell somebody to just focus on the positive in their life, what you're really doing is don't feel the full spectrum of your emotions. And that is really traumatizing because, as Brené Brown says, when you suppress one emotion, you suppress all of the emotions. So if a person doesn't have access to their grief and their sorrow and their pain of loss, then they also don't have access to joy and hope and love and connection and empathy and all of the things that we would say are positive. So I really don't even like to talk about emotions in positive and negative because I think that when you polarize them like that, you make one good and one bad. And I think it's much more accurate to say that there are emotions that are pleasant and there are emotions that are unpleasant. But those unpleasant emotions have a purpose. They help us to process the stress of losing a loved one, the fear of uncertainty, to help us to connect to other people and to feel the pain of other people, to resonate with someone else's sorrow and someone else's trauma, which is definitely something that is coming up for us culturally right now, is recognizing the systemic sorrow and grief and trauma that is circulating inside certain groups inside of our society. And so if we're constantly suppressing emotions, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant, we lose access to that empathy, and it further perpetuates our own trauma because we don't have the ability to feel the emotion that is related to the circumstance that traumatized us in the first place. And a lot of healing has to do with feeling those emotions. In fact, emotions are the language of your body. The sensation of emotion is how your body will talk to you, and there's parts of you that store trauma that don't have access to language. So when someone has some kind of fear or uncertainty or some kind of negative emotion come up, that's a part of them that needs to be addressed and heard at that level. You cannot have a rational conversation with that. You need to work with the sensory experience of that emotion in order to process it out. So when you tell people just focus on the positive, they're not actually processing out the experience. They're not actually doing the deep biological, neurological work of getting from here to there. They're just sort of like going around it, or what I've called in the past positivity washing, which is you have this big ball of grief, fear, sadness, uncertainty, whatever, and you just kind of put this veneer of positivity over the top. And eventually those emotions that are suppressed will probably explode out of you, whether they explode out of you in an emotional outburst or in health symptoms such as pain, which is a lot of what I deal with, chronic illness, anxiety, depression, all kinds of other things can be related to the suppression of those emotions. So this absolutely is a dangerous way of suppressing trauma or perpetuating trauma. So have you been told that you should focus on the positive and receiving abundance and all of these things when you were in the middle of a grief spiral or some really deep fear? If so, comment toxic in the comments below and let's all rally around this and let us know that we're not alone. Okay, so the third thing that I hear that life coaches say that perpetuates trauma is you're arguing for your limitations. And seriously, this one drives me crazy because generally when you hire a coach, it's because you feel stuck in some way. There's something that you're trying to achieve, right? Whether that's making more money in your business, whether that's finding the love of your life, whether that's getting your health under control, whether it's just getting a deeper connection to your horse, training your dog. Like there's coaches for all kinds of things. I tend to look at coaching and teaching as being really, really parallel, even though they're slightly different. But I would go to somebody who is a coach to learn something, to grow as a person. So when someone says you're arguing for your limitations, oh my gosh, it drives me crazy. Because the thing is, if a person feels limited, if you are asking them to grow and they feel like there's a block or a limitation there, something that's standing between them and the result that you together are working towards, it would seem to me that as a coach, it's your job to help see a way over, under, around, through, beyond the limitation. That's kind of what a coach is for, is to find out where the person is at and move them to the next place in their journey. This has always been a principle of the work that I do with people. So even in my bodywork practice, when I was doing more body work, when people would come to see me, I had a general structure for how I would work with people, but I never went into any session saying, this is exactly what we're gonna do today, because I would meet the person who would come in the door. I would work with the person who showed up that day. And sometimes what I thought I was gonna work with based on whatever happened in the last session or what we talked about on the phone or whatever wasn't actually what we ended up working with, because something else came in my door that day. And this, I think, is what's missing from coaching, is that there's not a meeting of the person where they're at and at the limitation where they're at. So again, as with you're not being coachable, if there's a limitation that you as a coach are not qualified to help the person see their way through, then it's appropriate to refer them out. Additionally, I wanted to presence that limitations that seem like mindset issues to a coach can be very real to a client. So the coach may be suggesting that the person take an action that seems innocuous to them. It may be making a phone call or putting a video on Facebook or whatever thing. It can be something that the action itself seems fairly minimal. But when that person does that, they are changing, they are showing up in a new and different way, and they are growing. And that can actually threaten their safety and dignity and connection, which are the primary elements, the belonging elements that we have as people. We desperately need to belong. We desperately need to be connected. These are not emotional needs. These are biological needs. It's how we stay alive. We are social creatures. We have to be in community. Without community, we die. We know this. When you put people into solitary confinement, it has all kinds of negative impacts on their psychology, on their health. I mean, it can actually make somebody crazy. So when a person faces rejection because they're growing, and that seems like a positive thing, right? That they're growing, that they're becoming more, that they're achieving the result that they want. But achieving that result may cost them something that feels like primal safety. And we've got to acknowledge that these limitations that seem like they're just mindset issues are actually biological barriers to their growth. It's not that they're there permanently, it's not that they can't be overcome, but they are very real. They need to be acknowledged as real, and they need to be worked with in that way. And they need to be worked through. And again, if the coach doesn't feel like that's something they can do, I think it's appropriate to refer out. But when you put that blame on the client, so you're just arguing for your limitations, it perpetuates that shame, and it perpetuates keeping them stuck, because now the client is sitting there going like, I know all this stuff and I know what I'm supposed to do and I can't seem to do it, and I must just not be good enough, or I must be inadequate, which is a belief that a lot of people have already, is that we're not good enough, that we don't belong, that we don't matter, that we're not smart enough, whatever version that is for you, however that shows up. And it just perpetuates that shame cycle where the person just gets even more stuck, even more stuck, even more stuck. Okay, so the fourth thing is you're playing the victim. Again, really super frustrating, because this really ignores the victimhood that a lot of people actually have stored in their bodies. The actual fact that people have been victimized. Certain groups within our culture have been victimized more than others. Women, people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, of course, belong to communities that have victimhood, victimization in their lineage, because there's actually been really traumatic things that have happened to those groups of people. And when you say you're just playing the victim to somebody, it's sort of like you are arguing for your limitations, and that it perpetuates that, because then the person gets stuck in that shame cycle around feeling like they're a bad client, feeling like they're a bad person, like they know all this stuff, and yet they can't seem to overcome their own internal barriers. But when there is victimization that has been in your family history, your cultural history, your genetic history, your personal history, your own personal lived experience of trauma, when you tell somebody that you are playing the victim, it ignores the fact that stepping up can actually feel like death. It can feel that vulnerable, like you are putting your life in the hands of a murderer, that you are willingly stepping into the jaws of a tiger, because people in that person's personal and familial and cultural history have probably been physically harmed or killed due to stepping out of line in some way. Just for sake of example, women in particular have been victimized in just being burned as witches. And so stepping out and showing up as a more spiritual or non-traditional healer type, just something that I personally have struggled with in my life, so I can speak to that, as feeling like if I show up in that way, I'm going to die, people are gonna come for me. And that has its roots in something that actually really happened to women. And there's many ways that this shows up depending on a person's unique combination of their own personal and family and cultural history. So when you say you're playing the victim, it's probably because they have victimization in their cells that needs to be healed, and also that there's cultural forces that are very, very real that that person may or may not have any control over, or may be at the mercy of. And so it's a much more complex pattern than just, you're just playing the victim and you just need to get over it. And that leads me to number 5, which is you need to work on your mindset. And this kind of has an interweaving with the toxic positivity focus on the positive thing, but just in broad strokes, I have heard this said so many times when a person is struggling with something and they're asking for help and they're being told like, it's just a mindset tweak. You just need to work on your mindset. You're just not thinking right. I think about this for myself as like the cult of wrong thinking. Just thinking wrong, just thinking wrong. And I think obviously your thoughts do matter. I'm not saying that's not important. I think mindset is absolutely critical. I think becoming aware of the thoughts that you're thinking and becoming self-aware is really important work. Not gonna downplay that. And you have a whole lot of biological processes that are going on from your neck down. And mindset really only focuses on the parts of yourself that you can perceive with conscious thought. The way I look at mindset really is that your brain doesn't just exist between your ears. There's no like termination point at the base of your skull. Your neural material that you call your brain actually condenses down to the rope that is your spinal column that then goes between your vertebrae, and it branches out into all of these nerves that then terminate in your muscles, bones, organs, etc. And more of your nerve fibers are actually sending signals up to your brain than are going down to your body. So for your vagus nerve, for example, if you're familiar with polyvagal theory, which if you're not, don't worry about it, but if you're familiar with that, it relates to a big nerve that wanders throughout your upper body, torso area. And 80% of the nerve fibers in your vagus nerve are going to your brain, and only 20% are going from your brain to your body. So there's all this information that is being taken in through your physical senses, literally your senses of the world, right? Like talk about coming to your senses. That's what those are, is your touch, your taste, your smell, your sense of vibration, your sense of the temperature. There's all kinds of data that's being taken in at a body level all the time. And that data is being assessed and assimilated by your nervous system. And then you have these reactive behaviors that are related to how you've navigated the world your whole life. So you're kind of behaving in habitual patterns that maybe you learned before you even had language. You mapped them on behaviors that worked to get you your needs met before you could talk and ask for what you needed when you were just a tiny baby. And those behaviors are embodied. So it drives me crazy when people say you need to work on your mindset and then they tell you to like go journal, because really I think that that's just so little of it. Like that's important stuff. It is really important stuff, but there's just so much more going on that is beneath the verbal level, that is much more in the being state of your body. And I, again, think it perpetuates that trauma loop of, I have spent so much time journaling and I've read all the books and I've done all the self-help, and why is this not working for me? And the truth is, it's probably not just you. I've talked to a lot of people who have said the same thing, that it's like, I have gone through all the personal development courses, I've read all the books, I've done all the things, and yet nothing's really changing in my life. And it's because there's all this other stuff going on, both internally in terms of your body, but also you don't exist in isolation. Your nervous system is part of the greater nervous system of your family, of your community, of your culture. As a global citizen, I think that we are a global nervous system. And so there's all of these layers of influence that are happening, and it's not just about becoming aware of your thoughts. Whew, okay, so that was a doozy. Are you still with me? Thanks so much for watching this far. If you like this video, please click like. If you didn't like this video, dislike it and let me know. I would love to know your opinion on this. Leave me a comment below. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what came up for you. Tell me if you've heard any of these things and how this video maybe helped you see that in a different light. Before you go, remember to subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified every time I release a new video. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.